When we talk about diet and nutrition, there's always some emphasis on one side or the other. Some people are always trying to cut out carbs and go low carb or keto. Others want to eat more plants and less meat. Still, others want to do intermittent fasting. Everyone's looking for that magic bullet, something that's going to allow them to reach their health goals with just one change to their diet. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way. And to really achieve long-term success, you need to take a balanced approach. I'm a family physician with over 20 years of clinical experience, and today we're going to talk about what a balanced diet is and why it's so important. Let me tell you, if there is a magic bullet in nutrition, it's balance. So stay tuned and let's dive into this. Now, when you think of the word balance, you might think of a seesaw, and that's kind of what we're doing here. We're trying to balance different nutrients against each other, different food groups against each other, and different approaches to eating against each other. Now, let's first start off talking about macronutrients, those being fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Now, there was a time not too long ago where the prevailing thought in nutrition was that you should be eating as few fats as possible, right? Fat was the enemy. Fat made you fat. The more fat you ate, the fatter you got. That was until we learned about different kinds of fats. Now we know that not all fats are created equal. There are some fats like saturated and trans fats that should make up only a very small part of your diet. Saturated fats are found in things like butter, coconut oil, lard, processed meats, and lots of packaged foods. And trans fats are found in things like fried foods and packaged foods, especially those that are fried or baked and listed on the label as partially hydrogenated oil. But other types of fats like monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, especially the omega-3s, should make up a larger part of your diet. Monounsaturated fats are found in things like avocados, olive oil, canola oil, nuts and seeds. And polyunsaturated fats, especially the omega-3s, are found in things like fatty fish, walnuts, and flaxseed. So you can see that depending on which type of fat you eat, they can either be good for you or bad for you. The next macronutrient is protein. You hear a lot about protein these days, especially when it comes to weight loss. A lot of people are trying to eat more protein because it does help you feel full and satisfied. It has the highest satiety index of any macronutrient, so it's going to keep you full for the longest period of time. Good sources of protein include lean meats like chicken and turkey, fish and seafood, beans, lentils, nuts and seeds, and low-fat dairy products. And then, the last macronutrient is carbohydrates. Again, there was a time where carbs were demonized, but the truth is that carbs are the body's preferred source of energy. We have been eating carbs since the beginning of our existence. They're easy to digest. They're easy for our bodies to break down and turn into energy that we can use immediately. They don't require much work, unlike fats. The key is to choose the right kind of carbs. And what we consider the right kind of carbs are complex carbohydrates. These are carbohydrates that come from plants and have lots of fiber in them. Fiber slows down the digestion of the carbohydrate. It makes it so that the sugar that's released into the bloodstream from that carbohydrate is much more gradual, and therefore won't cause blood sugar spikes. Good examples of complex carbohydrates include oats, brown rice, quinoa, fruits, and vegetables. So how do you balance these three macronutrients? Well, I like to use the plate method as a way of visualizing this. If you imagine a dinner plate divided into sections, you can easily see the proper proportions of each of these macronutrients. If your plate is divided into 4 sections, half of your plate should be filled with vegetables and fruits, 1/4 of your plate should be filled with lean protein, and 1/4 of your plate should be filled with complex carbohydrates. Now, if you're watching my videos, you probably pay a lot of attention to nutrition, and you probably already have most of this stuff figured out. But this is how you can explain it to someone who's brand new to nutrition and needs to understand the basics. But it's not just macronutrients that need to be balanced. You also need to balance different food groups against each other. Now, the USDA has a helpful visual that shows you what they consider a healthy eating plan, and it's called My Plate, and you can find it at myplate.gov. When you look at My Plate, you'll see that it looks a lot like the dinner plate that I just described. Half of the plate is filled with fruits and vegetables, a quarter of the plate is filled with grains, and a quarter of the plate is filled with protein. Now, you'll notice that dairy is missing from this plan, and that's because the USDA considers dairy to be optional. In the past, we used to say that everyone needed 3 servings of dairy per day. But over the past several decades, we've seen that there's no direct link between dairy consumption and better health outcomes. In fact, there's actually a pretty good link between dairy consumption and things like heart disease and certain cancers. So dairy is completely optional. And depending on what your personal situation is, you may want to eliminate it entirely. And then finally, you need to balance different approaches to eating against each other. For example, you may have heard that intermittent fasting is great for weight loss. And it is. Intermittent fasting has many benefits, including helping you lose weight, improving insulin sensitivity, lowering inflammation, and potentially reducing your risk for chronic medical conditions like diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. But if you get so caught up in intermittent fasting that you forget to eat healthy foods, then you're not going to get the benefits of intermittent fasting. You may even end up doing more harm than good. So it's important to balance intermittent fasting with healthy eating. Another approach to eating that a lot of people are talking about these days is the concept of intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is basically letting your body be your guide. If you're hungry, you eat. If you're full, you stop eating. And that sounds great. But the problem is that most people aren't in touch with their hunger and fullness cues anymore. They've lost touch with those over time. And so they really don't know what hunger feels like, or they ignore it so often that by the time they actually sit down to a meal, they're ravenous and they overeat. So, if you're going to try an approach like intuitive eating, you really need to learn to tune back into your hunger and fullness cues. Otherwise, it's just going to lead to overeating. So you can see that every approach to nutrition has its pros and cons. Every single one of them has benefits that can help you improve your health, but also risks that can hurt your health. So it's up to you to weigh the pros and the cons and decide for yourself what works best for you. Here's the thing, though. You can't do this alone. You need help. There's way too much information out there on nutrition. It's nearly impossible to sift through it all and figure out what's true and what's false. And even if you could do that, you don't have the time. And that's why it's so important to find someone who can help you sort through all this information and figure out what's best for you based on your own individual needs and preferences. Well, thanks for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you next time.